Hi, welcome back to the Psychological Coach. I want to continue talking about why it's so difficult for people to make the changes that they want in life, these big changes that they want in life. And what I've found really, and you've heard me likely say this before in other videos and in my books, is that it's really not in the effort that people put forward in terms of the changes that they want to make. I haven't found that it's about them not working hard enough and not trying harder every day to make the change. It's really in the missing insights and the confusion that they have about certain psychological experiences that are the obstacles to why they can't change. So really my goal is to try to clear those things up as much as possible. And then that usually opens up the door for people to make those steps that they need to make to change. So one area I want to talk about today is a problem that people have approaching themselves psychologically. So there is a way in which people think about themselves that can either be helpful when it comes to change or harmful when it comes to change, meaning they likely won't change. And typically people confuse those two things also. So they'll mix and match these two psychological states of mind, and I just want to clarify those and draw them out in this video a little more clearly. So one state of mind that we want to look at and focus on that will help the change process, support the change process. That state of mind is a mind of self-reflection, critique, like how you critique something, evaluate it, and self-awareness. So self-reflection, self-critique, and self-awareness, opposed to on the other side, self-judgment and criticism, self-criticism. Many times people think that they're thinking about themselves, they're becoming aware of themselves or self-reflecting when they're simply just judging themselves or criticizing themselves. And if you're judging and criticizing yourself about, in this case, the changes that you haven't made, typically what will happen is that you'll just get depressed and angry and bitter and give up on your change process. Sometimes people think, and I find this in their minds consciously and sometimes unconsciously, that through judging themselves and criticizing themselves, that's how they would motivate themselves. I've rarely found that to be the case. Usually I find judgment, harsh self-judgment and criticism not to be motivators. They tend to be demotivators. They tend to derail you from your change process. So let's talk about what self-reflection is and what self-critique is and what self-awareness is. So you have a real clear difference between these two psychological states of mind. So self-critique and self-awareness and self-reflection are ways in which you evaluate the contents of your mind in relationship to the change, in this case, in relationship to the change that you want to make. So this wouldn't be, it's not that it isn't evaluative, as I said before, you evaluate. So you honestly look at what you're doing, okay, and you hold yourself accountable. So it's not that you're not holding yourself accountable, you're not getting a free pass. But what you're doing is you're seeing exactly why you're not making the change. So you can begin to parse out very specifically what the obstacles are that are detracting you or distracting you from making the change process that you want. And you can only do that through evaluation, okay, through critique, through analysis. Then you can begin to see from a subjective position inside yourself, what's happening? Why am I not making this change process? How do I hold myself accountable to myself in the change process? That many times will look like this. Okay, we'll just give an example. So you'll have a sense of what a self-reflection and self-critique would look like when you're using it in relationship to your change process. So at the end of the day, you might say, okay, I had 3 things on my change list, the things that I wanted to take steps today towards making these kind of changes in my life. And I didn't get to any of them. I didn't make any of those changes. So when you're critiquing yourself, you say, okay, why did I make those changes? Let's see. Why didn't I take those steps to the changes that I want? Oh, I see here. I got distracted. I allowed resistance, right, to interfere with my change process through my steps. I ended up doing a bunch of tasks and it was, didn't totally see it, but now I see it. I see what I did, and I'll know. Okay, here's another way you'll know that you're critiquing instead of judging and criticizing yourself, which is a different form of psychological operation. That you'll plan for the next day. Okay, I'm going to have those 3 things there on my list to do tomorrow, and I'm going to be on top of it. I'm going to note the resistances, and I'm not going to let them trap me off this time. That's critique. That's analysis. That gives you a chance to stay motivated and get to those 3 things on that list. And also an example of judgment and criticism, right? Judgment and criticism would look at those 3 things and say, you failed again. You're never going to get to your change process. You might as well give up. You're lazy and you're a loser. So what the criticism will do and self-judgment will do, in this way, it'll come in as just a blunt object, okay, to try to address the problem of how and what way you haven't gotten to those 3 things on your list in this example. Well, what that will do is just discourage you. It's not going to motivate you. I haven't found that. And it'll usually derail the change process significantly. To take this a step further is that the judgment and the self-criticism, when it's operating sometimes for years in relationship to a change process, is simply in place as a defense or a resistance against the change itself. So that's one thing you can note. So when you approach your process of change again, and you start to imagine it, take steps to do it, and you don't fulfill your own goals and obligations towards starting to take that change, which is inevitable because you're never going to make change perfectly. You just have to start to make it. Watch what happens with the strategies in which you use mentally to assess the change process as you go. Are you critiquing? Are you fairly evaluating your progress with plans to move ahead? That would be critique. Or are you just simply judging and criticizing yourself? Okay. Those would be broad strokes, right? Judging and criticism is never specific. It's not looking specifically and evaluating why you didn't make your change. It's simply just hitting you with a blunt hammer. It's very stereotypical. I'm a loser. I can't make the change. I'll never make the change. I never did it anyway. The change won't matter anyway. These are just general statements. They're not specific. So we know they're just defenses against change itself. They're just used as a tool to stop you in the process of change. So once you see it for what it is, okay, not as anything real about you and your personality, but as a strategy and defense to stop your change process, you can begin to neutralize it. And then as you neutralize it, you'll be able to support an evaluative process, one that takes more time, that's more specific, okay, has personal accountability in it because you're holding yourself accountable. You're not letting yourself pass, okay, but will get you taking those steps in the change process.